I'm your host, Devin Hillsdon-Smith, and this is a special 10-part series of Site Selectors Are People Too. We're calling it The Architects of Prosperity. Now, don't worry. After this 10-part series, yes, I said 10, we are going to get back to the regular format of this show. In fact, the final episode of Season 3 after this 10-part series is going to be a story from the road featuring Jim Plump, a legend of an economic developer who covers the Jackson County Industrial Development Corporation in South Central Indiana. But for now, we're going to tackle what we are dubbing the Architects of Prosperity. We're going to dig into the genesis of our profession. So buckle up, history nerds. It's time to explore some history. Ever since my early studies in primary school, I have best learned a subject when I started with its beginning. Working through the history of a subject from its start provides the necessary context to properly study and practice it today. And so I'd like to offer up this series as a way for each of us to take a moment and dive into the history of our profession. Allow ourselves to be students again. Invest in ourselves just a bit. After all, this podcast is about humanizing our profession. So why not start by taking some time for ourselves to learn intentionally again? The first episode of The Architects of Prosperity that we are about to do is defining the quest. Stick with me on this one. It's more theoretical in nature, but it sets the stage for the rest of the miniseries. And because it's more theoretical, I've included a link in the description to this episode to it's a microsite in my Google Drive that provides an interactive infographic that'll really help you to hammer home the points that are being made, and it'll help you to visually see. I am going to go through a formula at one point to describe growth. So, moving forward, though, we're going to learn through storytelling. Don't worry. It's not going to be all theory and all spreadsheets. Trust me, there are some fascinating stories and characters coming up. Now, I recognize this goes off script for Site Selectors Are People Too, but do yourselves a favor and come along with me on this journey as we explore the story of our profession. I promise you it's worth it. Now, I know what you're thinking, but I'm a site selector. I'm an economic developer. I live in the here and now. I live in the future. I live in 10-year tax abatements and 50-year infrastructure plans. Why the bleep do I care about history? Actually, me putting that little bleep in there, that reminds me to let you all know I'm going to start trying some sound effects, especially given the fact that we're going to be going about the rest of this series in a storytelling mode. So stick with me on that one. It might last for one episode. It might last for the remaining 9. But we are going to try some sound effects. A lot better than bleep. But why do you care about bleep in history? Well, here's why. Because the very job title you hold, economic developer, is a surprisingly recent invention. If you had walked into a room in 1900 and called yourself an economic developer, people would have looked at you like you were speaking a dead language. And that's because the field that we work in, the modern version of the field that we work in, was born out of the chaos of post-World War II decolonization. It was a quest to figure out how to take a world that had been shattered and build it back into something better. But as we're going to discuss today, we've spent the last 70 years arguing over what better actually means. You see, are we just trying to make the numbers go up? Are we trying to make lives better? It's the difference between growth and development. And honestly, getting them confused is the most expensive mistake that we can make. I like to think of growth as the engine in our vehicle. how fast we can go, pushing us forward. Development is where we're going and how fast we want to get there. Think of them as two distinct but related terms. And in order to differentiate between the two, we're going to go through 4 quick segments today. This is going to be one of the shorter site selectors or people do, believe it or not. The first segment is going to be the spreadsheet versus the story, where we talk about the king of all metrics, economic growth. Segment 2 is going to be, what is development really? Right? So if growth is the spreadsheet, what is development? Segment 3 is taking a look at the broader picture, the philosophy of freedom. And segment 4, the long shadow of history, why the heck are we doing this series? And then we'll conclude. We'll have a break in the middle somewhere, probably after segment 2. But while I digress, before I digress, I guess I've already digressed. Yeah, I've already digressed. Whatever. Let's get into segment 1, economic growth. So we're going to start with the basics. In our industry, we love a good spreadsheet, right? We love metrics. And the king of all metrics is economic growth. Now, in formal terms, growth is unidimensional. It's quantitative, baby. It's the increase in a jurisdiction's output, whether that be the nation, the state that you represent, or the county that you represent. It's all about in our jurisdiction's output. Usually, we measure this via GDP, or gross domestic product. Now, for the nerds in the room, yes, there are a multitude of ways at looking at growth, development, and I am choosing to go down one path of looking at GDP and growth and development. There are plenty of other ways to look at it as well. I am not an economist. I studied economics in undergrad, a little bit from the legal perspective in law school, but this is the one that made the most sense to me as far as setting up this series, The Architects of Prosperity. So, for the nerds in the room, if we were to look at the slow swan style growth model, we're looking at something like total production equals capital to the alpha times technology times labor to the 1 minus alpha. Again, this is why I have created an infographic. Go take a look at it. It makes a lot more sense. But just to repeat, total production of a jurisdiction involves the capital, the labor, and the technology. Plain and simple. There's some exponential factors in there, but let's just think of it as total production equals capital times labor times technology. When we talk about growth, we're literally just talking about total production getting bigger. It's a purely economic metric. It's concerned with output, income, and aggregate monetary expansion. It's a mercantilist view of the world because it asks one question: is the pie bigger today than it was yesterday? But here is the danger. And this is something we see in site selection all the time. You can have massive growth while the community around that growth actually declines. Our research for this episode pointed out a haunting reality. The proceeds of growth can be wasted or retained by a small, wealthy elite. And let's be real, you've seen this. You place a massive tech hub in a zip code where the local population doesn't have the skills to work there. The GDP of that zip code explodes. Rents go up. High earners move in. But the original residents, their development didn't move an inch. In fact, it may have gone backward. And so if gross domestic product equals growth, and that is total production equals capital times labor times technology, what is development really? Development is multidimensional. It's quantitative and qualitative. It encompasses growth. Sure, you need money to build things, but it adds a focus on the factors that determine human well-being. Things about the metrics we don't always put on the front page of our RFPs. Literacy rates, life expectancy, job quality, environmental sustainability, social cohesion. You know, my mic is fantastic. I really hope you all didn't just hear me burp. If you did, you're welcome. Development is concerned with the structure of the economy. It asks, is this growth sustainable? Is it equitable? Does it actually improve the human condition? And to illustrate that, let's look at the history of the United States Economic Development Administration. When they started in the mid-20th century, they were all about capacity. They wanted to build the roads and the water lines. It was very, very top-down. But over time, they realized that wasn't enough. And so they pivoted. Their mission evolved to address socioeconomic inequities. They moved toward locally owned strategies. Hint, hint. That's a little bit of foreshadowing for the future when we talk about why economic development most happens at the local level. They realized that you can't just drop a factory into a town like a paratrooper. You have to grow the community from the bottom up. Like I said, short episode this time. We're going to head to break and come back and kind of pull it all together with the philosophy of freedom by Amartya Sen, a Nobel laureate. All right, folks, and we're back. I hope everybody is still awake. Again, I know this is more theoretical in nature. In the future, in this mini-series, The Architects of Prosperity, we are going to go about this by way of storytelling. And I can't wait for it. I am excited to try my hand at a French accent. It doesn't go well. I've already recorded that episode. I'm excited to delve into the stories, learn about some of our forefathers in this industry that we now know as economic development. So, the philosophy of freedom. This leads us to a massive shift in how we think about our jobs. In that next episode, episode 2, we will be talking about Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He was the 17th century minister to King Louis XIV. For Colbert, the purpose of the economy was the glory of the state. The economy existed to fund the king's wars and build Versailles. People were literally just tools to make the state stronger. But fast forward to the 20th century, and we meet a guy named Amartya Sen. He's a Nobel laureate, and he started what we call the capabilities approach. Sen argued that the goal of an economy isn't the glory of the state, and it's not even just wealth, it's freedom. He defined development as the long-term process of improving the quality of all human lives and capabilities by raising people's levels of living, self-esteem, and freedom. Your ability to go where you want to go, where you need to go at a moment's notice, your ability to have self-esteem, self-worth in what you do, and your quality of living. Think about that for a second. If you're a site selector or an economic developer, are you just a job creator? Or can you see yourself as an opportunity expander? If you bring a 1,000 job warehouse to a town, but there's no public transit to get the workers there, and no childcare to allow parents to work, have you actually increased their freedom? According to Sen, no. You've increased the GDP, that's for sure, but you haven't developed the quality of life of the people. You haven't developed the people. This shift from Colbert's glory to Sen's freedom is the most profound ideological revolution in the history of our industry. And I beg of you, the next time you put out an RFI, as you go through the site selection process, whether you be an economic developer or a site selector, don't just think in terms of assets or how you connect those assets. Think in terms of, when this project is said and done, have you increased the GDP and the economic output for that client, the company, and have you also increased the freedom of the people in that community? So, segment 4, the long shadow of history. Why are we doing this series besides the fact that I'm a history nerd? Why are we looking back at the messy details of the past? You see, for a long time, economists tried to be like physicists. They wanted clean, mathematical models. They ignored history because history is complicated and weird and doesn't always fit into a curve. But new economic history is changing that. We're finding that the prosperity of a community today often has roots that go back 300 years. That's right. So when we ask about the history of a site or the ethos of a community, it's not just about the most recent use of that site or who the community is today. It's going back in time and looking at the history of both to determine truly what that state is today. Researchers have shown that colonial era institutions, or even settler mortality rates from centuries ago, actually have a causal effect on why certain regions are struggling or thriving today. As site selectors, we are essentially forensic investigators. When we look at a piece of land, we aren't just looking at soil quality and utility hookups. We're looking at the grand tendencies of history. We're looking at the result of 100 years of policy, culture, and struggle. So, the conclusion, the road ahead. Here is our roadmap for this series. We are going to excavate the administrative and intellectual record of the past to find the genesis of the systems that shape our modern world. We're going to look at the mercantilists, the Industrial Revolution, the rise of the modern corporation, and the planners who tried to build utopia out of concrete and steel. The goal isn't just to learn history, it's to make us better at our jobs today. Because once you understand the difference between growth and development, you really can't go back to just looking at spreadsheets. So next time, we're going to meet the man who started it all, Jean-Baptiste Colbert of 17th century France. We're going to go back to the court of the Sun King to see where our obsession with industrial policy actually began. And like I said, after this 10-part series, of which this is one part, but kind of not because we're not into the storytelling yet, at the end, we're going to wrap up season 3 with a fantastic interview with my good friend, Jim Plump of Seymour, Indiana. I'm your host, Devin Hillsdon-Smith, and this is The Architects of Prosperity on Site Selectors Are People Too. We'll see you in the 17th century. Just a heads up, views expressed in this podcast are solely my own and are not attributable to any employers, whether past or present. Thank you.